And that's, of course, we're going to finalize the speaking section, right? Because we said we have 4 different tasks, 4 different questions. And now we're going to discuss the third one. We are in the half or in the middle of our excursus there. Okay. Well, we are live. And now let's go and do this together. Okay, great. So let me please share my screen with you guys. And thus we can, of course, start. Well, so here I have the presentation for you tonight. And we're going to continue with our excursus here in the speaking section. Well, let's go. So you remember last week, well, actually last class, right? Well, this Tuesday it was this Tuesday when we discussed the speaking section task number 2. And I told you, right? You're going to find out that task number 2, 3, and 4 are almost identical. And that has an explanation. There is a reason for that. And it's very simple, actually. You remember when we talked about the general aspects of the speaking section, and I told you there are 4 questions, yes, but merely 2 types of questions. The first type of question is independent. That is to say, we get the independent question. And this type of question is only present in the first question of the speaking section. And for questions 2, 3, and 4, all of them pertain to the second type of question that is called integrated question. And that's the reason why the third task, as we discussed it today, is going to appear very similar to you, to the second task, with a little, of course, and very much subtle but important variation. Okay, so let's discuss it. By the way, the title of this task is also integrated speaking task. And the only thing that it's varying here is the number, right? Because last time it was the second task, and now it's the third one. But the title or the name for this question continues, integrated question. Okay. Well, let us read here what it says. The third task will deal with academics, just like many questions and tasks in other sections of the TOEFL test pattern. You will be reading a short passage that is 80 to 100 words long, and it will be discussing an academic topic. This is actually the most relevant difference between the second and the third task of the speaking section. And it can be summarized as follows. In the speaking section task number 2, you remember what we practiced yesterday. We had to read and listen to different materials. First of all, a reading passage and then a conversation. And both of them were not only related, but in all our practices, the materials belong to, let's say, a very specific scenario. All of them were activities, events, changes taking place in a university, right? You saw that. And all of them were very trivial, things that could happen actually in your daily life. Now, in the third task, we are still going to read and listen to materials from ETS. We are going to still receive material from ETS, but this time it's not going to be a trivial subject. We're not going to be listening or reading about things going on campus, about things happening in a university. Not anymore. What we're going to be reading and listening about is academics. And by academics, I mean, well, science, right? Science with regard to biology, mathematics, physics, chemistry, or of course, any other scholar topic like art, computer science, I don't know, medicine, stuff like that. So notice that here, the only thing that is varying, as I say, is the category of our material, is the type of material we're going to receive, not material related to this university stuff anymore, but related to science, okay? So as I say, apart from this, there is no other actual variation for the question. We still have to read and listen, as I say, to materials from ETS. But in this case, both materials are going to be related to science. The reading passage could be, for example, an extract from a science magazine in which they are discussing, I don't know, asteroids, or in which they are discussing meteorites, or in which they are discussing, I don't know, let's say clonation, things of that sort. And afterwards, you're going to listen listening audio. And in this case, It's not going to be a conversation anymore, of course, because this is not related to people. This is not related to social things anymore. The audio listening you're going to be receiving is going to be a lecture, as we have listened before in the listening section, as we have had the opportunity to analyze and to digest very much consistently in the past weeks, right? Because we have been in the listening section with you already, and we have listened to very long lectures, classes delivered by professors at the university, in which they discuss a great variety of topics. And this time, in this third task of the speaking section, your audio is not going to be a conversation, as I say, anymore of two speakers, but a professor. It's going to be a single person discussing a topic in this lecture. And as I say, it's going to be related to the same topic you read in the scientific article. So for example, if your reading passage is an article discussing marine biology, then after you read the passage, you're going to have to listen to a biology professor discussing marine biology. I don't know, maybe they were talking about different types of marine organisms or things of that sort. Great. So you're going to listen to this professor talking about the very same topic. And of course, maybe amplifying a little bit the information that was there presented in the reading passage. Okay, that's the interesting here. Well, as I say, a lecturer will be giving you a few examples that complement the topic of the passage, and you'll be required to give a short talk that summarizes the items. Maybe you were wondering that. Is there any variation concerning my task? That is to say, what I have to do with this material? And the simple response is no. No, you don't have to change anything. Your approach is exactly the same. You're going to read, you're going to listen, you're going to take notes while you do both of those things. And then you're going to prepare a summary for the reading passage and for the listening audio. When you finalize that, you're going to have 30 seconds to prepare your response, to organize your ideas, your summaries with a template that I'm going to give you, of course, that is a little bit different to the previous one. And then you're going to have 60 seconds to respond, just as you did before. But I want you to understand right now that if you look at the picture I have on the screen, the concept of a journalist remains here. I told you last time when we were in class this Tuesday that you have to be like journalists, because what you do as a good journalist is to cover a lot of information from different sources. You take notes on that, you prepare a summary, and you deliver that summary to your audience, trying to present the information as you receive it, without altering it, without disrupting it, without changing it. And that continues, okay? You still have to offer a summary. You still have to be a journalist. You don't have to, maybe in this case, it's going to be more tempting. Why? Because let's say the topic is about physics, and we have a physician here, right? And this person is very much understood in physics. Or let's say we have, well, I think that somebody here is a professional in human affairs, if I'm not wrong, right? International relationships, that type of thing. Let's say that's the case, and your reading passage is about, let's say, international treatments. So you're going to read the passage about international treatments, and then you're going to listen to a professor discussing that. And maybe you are tempted to think to yourself, hey, I know about this. I know about this topic, and I think that the information they presented is not enough. You would say, hey, I can complement this. But that is not a great idea, okay? Even if you know about the topic because it's your specialty, or, well, you are an expert on that topic or something, you shouldn't try to change the information to complement it or to alter it in any possible way. What you have to do instead is to limit yourself to transmit the same information they gave you to your audience, that in this case, of course, is the reviewer, just as you receive it, okay? Without adding more details or information, even if you know about that topic, okay? So please have that very much fresh on your minds, because I think that in this part of the exam is way more tempting, because Many of you are going to be experts on the topics you're going to receive. And maybe you are tempted to say, hey, I know about this, I want to complement. Don't do it, okay? This is not possible, sadly. This part of the exam doesn't allow that type of complementation or additions to the information, okay? Great, so having said that, let us look at the timing. By the way, it's exactly the same than the second task. That's what I told you, this is almost identical. 45 seconds to read the passage about this scientific topic, 1 minute to listen to the audio. If it is a lecture about the same topic, of course, maybe it's going to be more than 1 minute. Could be 1 minute and a half, sometimes 2 minutes, but it doesn't go above that quantity. Then 30 seconds to prepare the response and 60 seconds to deliver the response, okay? Well, as you can see, the exact same timing you had in the second task, okay? Well, so having said this, before you make your questions, let me show you this on the simulator. And then I want to offer, of course, some space for you to ask questions if you want to have some of them, all right? So let me please access this very quickly so that you can get a glance at it. Okay, speaking, in this case, speaking task number 3, not 2 anymore. There you are. Great, so first thing you see when you are in the speaking section, task number 3, set of instructions as always. You don't have to read this, okay? It's just a repetition of what you already know. Next, so here I have the passage, as you can see. In this case, well, there's not going to be a very much long context statement or something. Like you remember in the second task, the lines we had here were more considerable, and that was because they were trying to give you context. But in this case, as the passage is scientific, context is not very much necessary, let's say, right? But anyways, it's just basically the order here. So you have the passage, as I told you, is the exact same length that we had also in the second task, from 80 to 100 words, not very much long. And yeah, apart from this, it doesn't change. You are going to have the same chronometer here on your corner, okay, on the right corner. And here you see your time. As I always say, backwards, 45, 44, 43, 42. And as I recommended to you before, if you read, let's say, the entire passage in 30 seconds, don't press the button next, okay? But if you stay there, better if you start thinking about your summary of the reading passage before you actually move on, okay, to the next part. I think it's way more important and, well, efficient to use that technique. Well, when the 45 seconds are over, the computer takes you to the same, well, to the next part. As you can see, the lecture.
Nah.
And in this case, as I say, I always reproduce it, but it's because it's a simulator. Don't get confused on the exam. You don't get the chance to reproduce anything or to pause it or something. Everything is automatic and you listen to this once, as we always say, okay? So please have that in mind, it's very important. You cannot overestimate this. Please try to always pay attention right from the beginning until the end, because, well, the information here presented is vital. It's vital for the summary you're going to prepare later. Well, when you listen to this, as you can see, 1 minute and 40 seconds in this case, almost 2 minutes, as I told you, you press the button next. And well, here comes time for the 30 seconds of preparation, okay, as in the second task, and then 1 minute to deliver that response. And as I told you, your response is going to be constituted of the summary of the reading passage and the summary of the lecture, okay? Well, so is there any question? And to this point, dear students, something that I could maybe clarify here, some concern or doubt and to this point?
Teacher, the audio could be 1 minute or more, right? It doesn't matter.
Yes, exactly. It can be 1 minute, very much roughly, or it could be 1 minute and a half, 1 minute and 40, sometimes 2 minutes, but it never goes more than that. It's always 2 minutes, like the limitation or the boundary is 2 minutes. But
and
it can
we have
change.
the time to see that?
Yeah, I mean, well, you see it because when you are like in this part, the audio
Nah.
uses automatically. You see here, right, the duration of of the lecture.
All right, thank you.
This part. Okay, my pleasure. Any other question, guys? Maya, Karen, any questions about this? Lenny? Okay, great, no question, thanks. Well, so now let me give you an illustration. As always, I think that illustrations are certainly crucial for you to understand this. So, well, let us go and have those illustrations. I have two exercises here that I responded some time ago, and I recorded them. Of course, I think this is going to be important for you to learn how to respond this. Okay, so here I have the first example I want to let you have. And you're going to notice as well the difficulty, right, of the reading passage, because maybe that's another difference when compared to the second task, that here, of course, as we are discussing science, is going to be more difficult, certainly, right? Complexity always augments when you have this type of scientific and scholar debate. So, but I think that I'm very much confident and optimistic that all of you are very good at this. So it's not going to be a big deal. Oh yes, no, don't worry, dear Lenny, it's totally fine. Okay, great. So let's go and read this together. I'm gonna paste it here in the chat box and also here in the WhatsApp group, whatever you want to read it. Here you have. Okay, awesome. So let's read this together. It says the following. What is mitosis? In biology, the process called mitosis is a part of the cell cycle in which chromosomes are replicated and separated into two new nuclei. This is a process that only occurs in certain types of cells, called eukaryotic cells. Most animals undergo this type of mitosis, although the process can vary between one animal and the next. Errors sometimes occur during this process, which is how many forms of cancer come to be. These are typically caused by having too few or too many chromosomes in the duplicated cells. Some organisms also use mitosis as a form of reproduction. Well, there you are. Very simple thing, mitosis, right? It's a process in which chromosomes are replicated and cells are separated basically, and we get a new cell with two different nuclei, right? Well, now it's time for us to, so as I say, you get 45 seconds to read this, right? If you read before the 45 seconds are over, stay there and having your paper and your notes, start thinking about your summary. When the time is over, the computer will let you listen to this lecture, okay? So please pay attention and try to take your notes if you can, so that we can compare later, okay? Let's go and listen to this.
Now listen to a lecture on the same topic.
Okay, so mitosis. Many of you might be wondering how this applies in the real world. Take the example of a cut on your finger. Why doesn't the cut stay open forever? Well, because the cells in your finger undergo mitosis. The body uses this process to repair damage and replace dead cells. It's not always a fast process. The cut on your hand will usually take several days to heal completely. The process of mitosis is at its most rapid when we're in our infancy. It has to be this way. Human beings grow rapidly during this time, so they need a lot of new cells to replace the ones which die and help the baby boy or girl to grow. Other animal species, such as the dog, undergo this process even more rapidly. Ever noticed how a puppy the size of your hand is the size of a small horse 18 months later? Well, the process which enables this rapid transition is mitosis too. Another and very different example of mitosis is that of bacteria. Most bacteria are asexual by nature, that is, they do not require a partner to reproduce. They use mitosis in order to churn out exact copies of themselves. Some bacteria, such as the one called Salmonella, can reproduce once every 20 minutes.
Great. Well, so that's the lecture. And as you finalize listening to this part, then you would get 30 seconds in order to prepare your responses. and then 60 to deliver that response. So let us listen to my response to this question when I had the opportunity to respond it. And thus, well, you're going to be introduced to the new template or structure for responding this question that I'm going to, of course, be displaying to you in a very much short time. So let's listen to my response, try to catch how I'm responding, what type of phrases I use, what type of introductions and transition phrases I'm using. Try to catch all those details.
Okay, in the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of mitosis, which is a process by which eukaryotic cells are replicated and separated into two nuclei. On the other hand, in the listening passage, we observe some practical applications of this phenomenon in the real world. For example, when we have a cut in our fingers, the way that they heal, or the way that the cut heals, is by mitosis, and the cells are reparated and the damaged ones are simply eliminated, and that way we heal. This process is also very much efficient and rapid in our infancy because we need to grow up, and it is the same case for dogs because when they are puppies they can grow up super fastly into a completely large animal. Also, it happens in some bacteria which are asexual and do not need partners to reproduce, as for example Salmonella.
Great, there you are. Well, notice that the template that I used was very similar to the second one, and just with a few variations, right? Especially in the introduction phrase and of course in the transition phrase, but the rest is basically the same. You're gonna be looking at it by yourself anyways, but before you do so, let me show you one more illustration, which I think is going to confirm what I just told you, okay? So let's go. Here we have it, okay. I'm gonna copy this one once again to the chat box and also to the WhatsApp group, okay? All right, there you have. So it says the following. Okay, we're going to take this out. Okay. So compassionate consumerism. Compassionate consumerism is a relatively new trend in the American retail market. In this type of consumerism, when individuals make a purchase, a portion of the money they pay is allocated to a charitable cause. Nowadays, individuals often look for ways to contribute to the betterment of humanity, but they don't always have the financial resources to do so. Compassionate consumerism appears to be a good middle ground. While critics feel that it's only a marketing ploy aimed at appealing to people in their 20s and 30s, others applaud the effort. They argue that it is desirable for companies to sacrifice profits in order to help those in need. Well, there you are. Now, let us listen to a lecture about this topic in a business class. All right?
Now, as the reading suggests, many companies have embraced the idea of compassionate consumerism over the past few years. Studies show that customers are generally supportive of such efforts, especially very young shoppers. Not only that, but companies make a lot of additional profits from this kind of compassionate marketing. Some companies even thrive off of it. Now, take ABC Shoes, for example. They're kind of like the pioneer of this type of consumerism. You know the shoes, right? Those flat, simple slip-on shoes which are based on a type of traditional Argentinian footwear called an alpargata. Anyway, ABC Shoes achieved a huge market share about 7 years ago with their one-for-one business model. Basically, if you buy a pair of ABC shoes, they donate another pair of shoes to an impoverished individual. While this program has cost ABC Shoes a lot of money to administer, they've also made so much profit that they've expanded to include not only shoes, but also eyewear and coffee. Speaking of coffee, another famous company that has adopted the compassionate consumerism model is Bob's Coffee. Now, the one-for-one model doesn't make much sense for a cup of coffee, but a portion of the cost of certain items is sometimes donated to various nonprofit organizations. Since Bob's deals closely with coffee bean farmers in South America, they have recently launched a campaign where 10% of all purchases are donated to preserving the South American rainforest. And, would you believe it, on the day they announced the campaign, there was a line out the door at Bob's Coffee right here on campus.
Great, there we are. So, if you notice here, there is something that I want to emphasize, and that is the way the speaker always presents a little commentary on the subject you have read about, in this case, compassionate consumerism. And then the speaker normally offers, in this case, the professor, right, offers two examples or two illustrations that exemplify such a topic or phenomena. In this case, for example, the professor, after discussing a little bit about this topic and sharing some insights about compassionate consumerism, well, stating that according to what she has studied, it is actually a very good practice that costs money to administer, yes, but also, of course, provokes a lot of financial benefits to the enterprises that undergo this process. Now, notice that afterwards, she dedicated the rest of her lecture to offer two illustrations of this phenomena, compassionate consumerism, with Bob's Coffee and ABC shoes, right? So if you pay attention very carefully, what the professor did in the last exercise, in the last lecture, the one about mitosis, was exactly the same. She offered a little talk on that phenomenon, mitosis, and then she continued to offer two examples of how mitosis actually worked in the real world, right? Talking about puppies and then talking about your wounds, right? When you have to heal, how your cells separate and allow your treatment and betterment. Now, that is always the case, all right? You're gonna notice that when we practice today or tomorrow, that professors always follow the same pattern. The exam is very repetitive, as I always tell you. The professor comments a little bit, right? A little of information, data with regard to the topic, and then just offers illustrations, 2 or 3 examples is the normal thing. It's the common pattern, as I say, all right? You have to notice this because in your response, as we're going to discuss it right now, the template uses this, realizes that pattern, and applies it in a very efficient manner so that you offer a great summary, okay? But well, listen to my response first before we get into the structure, okay?
In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, which is a phenomenon that happens when people buy things knowing that a portion of their payment will be allocated to a charitable fund. Likewise, in the listening passage, we have seen a study that confirms that this practice and method is very much supported by young shoppers, and that it also promotes and helps enterprises to get additional profits. For example, ABC Shoes was a pioneer in this specific practice. They made some sort of shoes called alpargata. They had a one-for-one business model in which they received a purchase and they also gave away another shoes to a poor person. You also have Bob's Coffee, which basically receive a purchase and they donate one portion of that to an ONG. They are launching right now a campaign to help the South American rainforests.
Great, there you are. So now that you have listened to my responses, it's time for me to show you the template that I was using, okay? And it's actually this one. It's very simple. So look at it. Once again, 4 different steps to follow. The first one, an introduction or an introductory sentence. But in this case, it's this one. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of. So if you notice, this was the phrase that I used both in my first response and the second one, right? In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of. And now here comes your summary of the reading, right? And I think that this sentence, the way we have wrote it here in the structure, is very efficient, because if you look at the sentence, it is almost forcing you, or at least very naturally directing you, to mention the title of the topic you are discussing, right? Or let's say the general idea. So for example, the way I do it is this. In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of mitosis, right? In the first example. Or in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, right? In our second example. And then I offer a very short, okay, very short, as we said yesterday, very superficial summary of the reading passage. The concept we discussed yesterday, when I told you guys your response, when you're summarizing the reading passage, must be tremendously superficial to make it in one sentence if you're capable. It's always going to be applying even to this question, okay? That your summary of the reading passage must be way more superficial than your future summary of the listening part, okay? So the very same concept remains. Try to make your summary of the reading part superficial, almost in one sentence if it is possible. And then your summary of the listening part is going to be, of course, way more longer. It's going to be more considerable, and you're going to include more information there. You're going to have the chance to be a little bit more detailed and specific. But in this first part, when you summarize the reading passage, try to make it as superficial and generic as you can. For example, as I did, right? In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of mitosis. That is a process in which cells divide between each other, right? Something like that. Or in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of compassionate consumerism, which is the practice to consciously purchase a product, knowing that another portion will be allocated to a charitable fund. That's it, right? Not offering even two sentences. One very sentence is totally fine, and you don't need more apart from that, okay? So when you finalize this part, okay, in the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of, and you offer your summary of the reading part, you move on to the second step. Then in this case, it's this one, and has this in transition phrase, excuse me. Likewise, in the listening passage, likewise is a connector, right? Asimismo, likewise in the listening passage. And here, well, comes your summary of the lecture. As you know, the idea here is to make a very short, general summary to say like, likewise in the listening passage, we listen to the professor discussing this by two examples, right? And then you come to the third and to the fourth step. And here, as I told you before, we have just reminders, okay? These are reminders. These are reminders for, to you, so you remember in your response, the summary you are offering of the listening part must always contain the main points that are mentioned. And what are the main points mentioned in the lectures? Well, the main points in the lectures are always going to be the illustrations that the professor gives for illustrating and exemplifying the topic she or he is discussing, okay? Please have that very clear in mind. In this case, in the case of lectures, the main topics or ideas are always going to be the illustrations, the examples that the professor mentions for exemplifying the topic, okay? So the thing is that after you offered a very short and generic summary of the listening part, you go and talk in depth about the first illustration the professor offered and the second illustration the professor offered, something like this. Likewise, in the listening passage, the professor discussed that consumerism, compassionate consumerism, is indeed a very profitable practice. She also said that ABC Shoes is a very good example of this technique. ABC Shoes is a company that has a 1-to-1 model in which whenever somebody makes a purchase, they donate, another pair of shoes to an impoverished individual. Secondly, she also exemplified this phenomenon with Bob's Coffee. And she talked about how Bob's Coffee donates a particular percentage of the financial benefit they receive for every single purchase in order to help a charitable cause. And nowadays, the professor says they are launching a campaign to help the South American forest. And that's it. As you can see, I'm talking in depth, of course, about these two particular ideas, the illustrations the professor mentioned, and that constitutes my response and the most important part of my response, actually, as I told you, because the summary of the reading passage is just something very much trifling, and we are offering to make it complete, but what they care about is your summary of the lecture, okay? So always try to employ more time there, more efforts, more vocabulary, try to make it, as I say, as loyal as possible to the information when you receive it, but in a very simplified manner, okay, with your own words. And that's it. That's it with regard to the template for this task. Is there any question with regard to how this works? Your students any concern about how to use this template? Maya, Lucia, Karen, or Lenny, any question about this?
Teacher, I have a question. Sometimes, I don't know, when you get nervous or something like that, and you don't get a lot of the information that the reading, not the reading, sorry, the passage that you listening, and you don't get a lot all the information that the reading offers to you. So in this case, I don't know what it's your advice or maybe something that we can do in these type of cases.
All right. Yeah, it's a very good question. So yeah, you're right when you say sometimes because of the nerves or maybe the vocabulary that's, let's say, in that very particular scenario seem to you a little bit difficult to understand. Maybe you're going to have, you're going to get some troubles to understand. And that's the reason why maybe you're going to you're not going to have enough information to talk about in your summary. If that's the case, my most sincere advice would be try to talk about what you managed to get, okay? And better if you don't make up something. You know that in the first question of the speaking section, I always tell you, make it up, right? That is to say, if you don't have anything to say, make up story. Talk about your dog that died and then almost magically resurrected, and then you lived a happy life for 5 more years with them or something. That was great in the first task of the speaking section because everything was personal. And when they are talking about personal things and you're asked to talk about your own life, there are no limitations, right? So you can make up whatever. But now we are not in the first question anymore. We are in the third question. And here what they are requesting out of us is to present information as we receive it. They are basically asking our help as translators, right? If you think about it figuratively. So if you don't manage to get a lot of information in details, better if you try to merely talk about what you did get in the listening audio. Because if you try to complement with your information or your opinion, as I say, it's just going to complicate things further. Given that, as I say, it's not allowed in this part of the exam to talk about personal things, external information, or data you may be aware of that is not mentioned here in the passage. So if you don't manage to get information, try to talk about in a very long manner and with long sentences maybe about what you did manage to catch. So for example, if you just got one illustration of the audio of the listening part, instead of making up a second one because you didn't listen to that one, try to make your explanation and summary of the illustration you did catch very extensive. Try to make it as large as you can in order to fill, of course, the entire response with information and data, right? But as I said, that's the best thing you can do in that case. That if you just manage to get, for example, one illustration, instead of making it very superficial and very much short, try to make it extensive just in that case, right? Because when you do get both of these illustrations, you have to measure, right? And you have to calibrate your time for each of these illustrations so that you can include them both in your response. So summarizing them, if you actually do not manage to get all of the information, talk about what you got in the longest possible time. That is to say, take your time, make long sentences, speak without any type of contraction so that you can feel the time and make it appear as if that's all you got, but well, it's just not a big deal, right? But that would be my recommendation. Yeah, is that fine?
Thank you, teacher.
All right, my pleasure. Great. So any other question, guys?
Yeah, teacher, it's good to use contractions or not per se.
Yeah, it is fine because well, at the end, contractions are a very normal thing in English. It is not something against your speaking. You're not evaluated with regard to how many contractions you offer in the response. But well, I mean, personally, I always try to speak more formally just because that's the way I have accustomed myself to speak like. But if you are somebody who uses a lot of constructions in your speaking and your lexical delivery, that's totally fine. Don't change that. Don't try to make it appear as if you weren't using a lot of contractions, because as I say, it's nothing negative. Okay, it's not something that is going to harm your score. But if you would like to add a sense of formality to the response, you can of course try to always speak more formally, right? At the end, I think it's just something that we all have to get used to, right? Because normally when you are trying to apply for scholarships, or you are interview with somebody, or I don't know, something like that, you always have to speak more formally, right? Because that's how it works. But in the exam itself, no worries. It's just irrelevant. Yeah, is that fine? Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, so any other question, guys? Any other thing here? Okay, great. No questions, I think. So now, as we have more time, let us go and practice one of these exercises, okay, together. Somehow prefacing what we're going to do tomorrow, because tomorrow, as I told you, the plan is to use the entire class for practice, okay? But let's have, let's say a prototype tonight in the class. So let's go. Okay, we're going to use this one actually. Well, here I'm gonna paste this reading passage to you in the chat box. Okay, there you have it, and also in the WhatsApp group, and you're gonna have the chance to read it. Okay, I'm gonna give you 4 or 5 seconds for that. I actually have the chronometer right here. So please, all of you, start reading that passage, and then we're going to listen to the lecture in this case. Let's go. Fantastic. So now listen to a lecture on principal negotiation.
Now, listen to a lecture on this topic in a business class.
You can see the effects of principled negotiation right at this university, actually. We have, a private company running our cafeteria, right? The university pays the company to buy food, hire employees, and serve meals to the students. When they drafted the contract outlining their expectations, the university and the food service company had to think about their future together and how they could keep students happy. Only if the students were satisfied would the relationship be able to continue smoothly. That was the common goal. So, at the company's request, the university agreed to fund training the cafeteria workers, precisely because they saw that training as being in the best interest of the students, even if the direct benefit was for the food service employees, and it was coming out of the university's pocket. And at the same time, the food service provider agreed to buy and serve only organic foods, ingredients that cost more but are healthier for student diners. If the food service had refused to buy those higher quality ingredients, it's more likely that students would have passed on meal plans, or worse, requested the university find a different service. Obviously, the company'd want to avoid that. In the long run, these kinds of decisions were in line with everybody's goals, especially you, the students.
Using the example of the university cafeteria, explain what is meant by principled negotiation.
Awesome. Well, now you get 30 seconds to prepare your responses, okay, your students. So please, all of you, start thinking about your summaries and applying them into the structure we have just shared together. You can start with your preparation now. Fantastic. So now it's time for you to start with the responses, okay? So in this case, please, our dear Lucia, you're going to help me with the first response, okay? So please, you can start responding to this question now.
Okay, in the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of principal negotiation, and it was compared between business similar to sport games. Likewise, in the listening passages, we talk about the principal effects and analyze different business like cafeteria or the food service providers. The first point that we can see is the first illustration about private cafeteria that has to fit and to adequate all the service according the happiness of students, and it implies a special training, the same as the food service provider, that it has to be organic, could be expensive, but all of these points achieve one goal: the satisfaction of the students.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Sia, very good. And now let's continue with Karen, okay? So please, dear Karen, you can start responding to this question now.
Okay. In the reading passage, we have been immersed into the topic of the business negotiation that it talks about that it's similar to sport games. To continue in the part of the reading, the teacher gives the students an example about the cafeteria in the university and talk about the negotiation that they have between. So it talk about that it's important to know what's in this case the student needs to do a better work together. So it's a way to improve in this case the goal of the achievement that in this case the cafeteria and the university have together.
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, and now let's go with our dear Maya. So please, Maya, you can start responding to this question now.
The reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of business negotiation, being similar to sport games as a win-lose scenario, and also about principal negotiation as a long-time business partners. Likewise, in the listening passage, it was about a cafeteria company and meeting the expectations between the company and the college so they could be satisfied. First lecture point, it was about knowing the difference between business negotiation and principal negotiation. Second lecture's point, it was about making the company and the students happy with the services that they gave by and rating the employees so they can serve only organic food to the students.
Okay, thank you very much, Maya. Fantastic, thank you. And now let's finalize with Lenny, okay? So Lenny, please, you can start responding to the question now.
In the reading passage, we've been immersed into the topic of business negotiations, where both negotiators working toward a common objective. Likewise, in the listening passage, we've learned about the effects of negotiation. For example, in a university cafeteria, where that pays to a food company, and the food company should try to offer the best service and to the students, but the students need to receive the best service to this cafeteria too. So, for example, if they need an organic food, they need to buy ingredients that are more expensive. So they try to find different services that benefit to employees and students mainly.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Great. So let's offer some feedback then to all of you. Great, so I think that overall all of you were fantastic in this exercise. Lucia, you offered a very short summary of the reading part. Very good, because it allowed you to have plenty of time to discuss the listening part. Excellent. The same for Karen too. Well, for a great summary of the listening part, very much specific and detailed, very much scrupulous. Great. Maya as well, very good summary. Maybe just a little bit out of time, but it's something to calibrate. Just don't worry. It's just a matter of course, looking at the clock, right, and having that a little bit more controlled. But it was great. And then Lenny as well. Great summary of the reading, the listening, nothing to say. It's just very good. Okay, great. I think that all of you are excellent. Actually, well, as I say, it's just like the practice you got yesterday have turned you into a very good performer, right, of this part, because it's basically the same. So that's how you improve in the TOEFL exam, just practicing, and as everything is similar, you just get better and better and better. Okay, so that's the beauty of this exam. Well, we're going to finalize here thus with our class, and tomorrow, as I told you in advance, we're going to practice the entire class, okay, for the section, for the task number 3. So please, as I take your assistance, help me with your kind responses to our poll tonight, and please listen to your names. And if you have any question, please as well speak up. Great, and now please help me with another poll. As we always have to fill 2 on Thursdays, so please help me with that one too. Thank you very much. So here we have Lenny Jimenez.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Lenny. We also have Maya Mariel.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Maya. Fantastic. We also have Lucia Sulema.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much. And we have Karen Dinelli.
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much, Karen. Well, great, guys. Thank you. Thank you for your kind responses. And as I say, I'm going to be seeing you next time, that is to say tomorrow, to practice this together. Okay, so have a good night and see you tomorrow.
Bye, teacher.
Teacher. Bye, girls.
Bye, girls.
Thank you very much. See you guys.